So here's the big question. Is it truly viable to play free-to-play Iuno as a main DPS? Or is she basically stuck as Augusta's dedicated support? Let's find out the answer together in this video as we go through her builds, mechanics, team comms, as well as team showcases with side-by-side comparison with C6 Mortefi, just to show you the improvements of Jiyan and Augusta. So without further ado, let's begin! Alright, starting with her weapon, I'm going with the standard 5-star gauntlet, the Abyss Surges, which is basically the best free-to-play choice for any builds. You could run the 4-star Magato if you're running her as a pure support, but with how quick her auto recharges, personally I don't think it's necessary. Plus, her damage is surprisingly solid for a sub DPS, so go with the Abyss Surges if you can. By the way, if you happen to have Xian's signature, well, go for it instead, as it's pretty much as good as Iuno's own, just like Jiyan's signature for Augusta. Now as for the echoes, I managed to farm 2 different sets for different builds, 2+3 Crown of Valor for a DPS build, and Moonlit Clouds for a pure support build. That way we can see her best potential in both roles. But for my testing, even when supporting other DPS, it's still better to use the Crown of Valor, as Iuno's damage is actually pretty insane, unlike the usual support. Anyway, as for her forte skills, the middle one is definitely the most important as usual, since it buffs both the damage and the healing. Next followed by her basic attack, skill and liberation, which are all equally as good in improving her own damage. As for her intro, forget about it, it's trash. Alright, since she is designed as a sub DPS support, naturally her gameplay is gonna be very straightforward. But for some reason, the official tutorials are actually extremely confusing that it doesn't teach you anything, but to make things even more complicated. I don't know who designed this, but man, seriously. Anyway, here's the easiest way to play her. All you need to do is to trigger her intro, use her liberation, press jump button once, spam her basic attack and skills until her auto fully recharge, then finally use the special heavy attack and then switch out. That's all you need to do with her, and unfortunately tutorial doesn't tell you anything about this at all. By the way, similar to Arrow Rover, you don't have to wait for the special attack animation to finish. You can swap her out mid-animation, and she'll still finish the special heavy attack on the background, which is a pretty nice trick. And that's basically everything you need to know. You can literally skip all the details if you're only playing her as a support for Augusta or Jiyan. But for those who are planning to run her as a DPS, here are the details. When you press double E, she'll enter a special stat with 2 different forms, Ground and Aerial, in which you can freely switch between them with the jump button. Simple, right? Alright, now, Ground attacks can build out the middle gauge, whereas the aerial attacks will consume them to power out her attacks, making them hit harder, speeding out her auto recharge, and even healing your whole team. So this energy is basically the bullets for your aerial attacks. This is why you should always start with intro and liberation, as both together instantly reveals her gauge, shortening the foreplay. Plus, this combo also instantly messes her passive stats, which grants her 40% damage bonus right from the beginning. So, the ground attacks are only for situations where your intro and liberation are not ready, like for example you're playing her in the overworld, or you're extending her on-field time like this footage here. Lastly, regarding her special heavy attack, make sure to use it at the very end of her rotation, because it will remove the 40% damage bonus of herself. In exchange, it creates a domain similar to Shopkeeper's, which heals, restores stamina, and most importantly, grants up to 40% damage bonus when your on-field character generates shields. That said, this effect is basically tailor-made for Augusta, so if you don't have her, you can pretty much forget it ever exists. So yeah, that's basically everything about her kit. Oh, and one last thing you probably already know, her auto provides a whopping 50% heavy attack buff, making it one of the strongest auto in the game in terms of raw stat value. Alright, now moving on to her team building. Iuno is a heavy attack support as we know, so naturally she's great for such DPS, namely Jiyan, Augusta, and our standard 5-star unit Jian Xin, who is the only one who can fully benefit from Iuno's buff aside from Augusta. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't mention Jian and Phoebe, who also deals damage with heavy attacks. The biggest reason is that they can't apply Spectral Further by themselves. They always need someone else to handle it, whether it be support Phoebe or Spectral Rover. So that's already 2 slots down, leaving the last one to Shopkeeper and Valina. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's basically Iuno vs Shopkeeper, and there's just no way she wins. 50% crit value is simply far better than 50% damage bonus, especially since both Jian and VB already have an extremely high damage bonus, which suffer from heavy diminishing returns. Now as for DPS Iuno, basically there are only 3 supports that work well with her: Ciaccona, and once again, Jian Xin. That's why I decided to mess her out to give her a chance, so I can see exactly how she performs alongside Iuno. As for the last slot, even though Iuno already has healing and shielding, it's still the best to run Valina and Shopkeeper, since only them can provide team-wide damage buffs. Last but not least, you can definitely run Iuno as a pure healer, though I'm only recommending it as last resort, since she doesn't provide any universal damage buffs like Valina or even Baizhi, let alone Shopkeeper. Not to mention, her healing is actually pretty weak, unless fully dedicated to a healing build. Alright, so that's about everything for her team building, which means finally it's time for some real showcases. First up is naturally our Iuno's best partner, Augusta, in which I'll be comparing her with C6 Mortefi just to show you the improvements. Though I have to say, I had no choice but to choose Hecate as our testing ground, since it's the only chamber without arrow and fusion resist. And as you can see, this chamber is full of nasty enemies that keep teleporting, so the comparison might be a little bit inaccurate, which is unfortunate. Anyway, one thing I've noticed is that Iuno is just so much comfortable to play than Mortefi, since not only she's always on the air, but also her echo actually has a very powerful grouping, which makes things so much easier. Because of that, there's no doubt that she's gonna be so much better than Mortefi in Weapon West. Anyway, when it comes to the damage, there's basically no difference at all between Iuno and Mortefi, as you can see the final slash into both teams, which is the same 130k. Honestly, I didn't expect this at all. However, in terms of clear time, Iuno is actually miles ahead of Mortefi, mainly because her own damage is much stronger than the usual sub DPS. That's why although her auto speed and buffs are similar to C6 Mortefi, she's around 40% stronger than him for Augusta. I'll keep this comparison playing so you can see exactly where Iuno beats Mortefi. On the other hand, since we already know for Augusta, Iuno is just on par with C6 Mortefi in terms of damage. So naturally she's gonna be a lot weaker when paired with Jiyan, who can't generate shields for 40% damage bonus. Even though her damage is better than Mortefi, the loss on Jiyan's damage is just too much, which means it's basically a nerf. Though I have to say, Iuno is a lot easier to play than Mortefi, but honestly that's about it, which isn't worth a cost of 5 star at all. Now as for our DPS Iuno, I would say it's definitely viable, but only if you have Ciaccona, which conveniently she's currently out together with Iuno. So this playstyle is pretty much intended by the developers. Damage wise is pretty alright, as I can clear most tower or adversity chambers, except the newly added middle 3 and 4, which is just about 10 seconds short. I'm pretty sure I can beat it if you give me more time to practice the rotation, but that's basically her damage limitation. That's why in my opinion, it's best to pull a signature for her for DPS build, just like investing any other DPS in this game. The standard Abyss Surges is just a little bit too weak. Though aside from her damage, her mechanic is definitely one of the top even among all DPS, which in my opinion, is on the level of Carlotta and Pavlova. Not only she's a ranged attacker, but also she stays on the air most of the time, with totally insane mobility. Honestly, as someone who enjoys Blunt, she's making me drool over her kid. Man, it just feels so smooth to play.
日向ぼっこの時間ですよ。ご清聴ありがとう。開演の時間だ。華麗にそれだけかしら。
Finally, on the other hand, I've tried to pair her with Jian Xin, who is supposed to be her best free-to-play support for DPS Iuno, but unfortunately it just doesn't work. Not only her damage is far too weak even under Iuno's buff, but also her auto generation is very slow, even with the R5 Makato. It's still playable, but don't expect broken results. So honestly, if you don't have Ciaccona, it's best not to go for the DPS build. Nevertheless, Iuno herself is definitely capable of being a DPS. She has the potential and mechanic, just needs a right support, in which currently we only have Ciaccona. Maybe in future we'll get a better support for her, but don't get your hopes up, because from their trends of releasing new characters, it's very rare for new units to be compatible with the oldest. Alright, finally we have come to the conclusion. First of all, for Augusta's Havers, you shouldn't worry about Iuno's strength at all, as she's an extremely huge improvement to Augusta, both in terms of damage as well as comfort level. But for those who didn't pull Augusta, your best bet is to make her as a DPS by pairing her with Ciaccona, which is actually not bad at all. As for those who don't have Augusta nor Ciaccona, well, I don't think you should touch this unit at all. Honestly, she won't be any use to you. Alright, that's about everything for this video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.